Hello and welcome to Python in 10 lunch break sessions. This is session A or part 1. It is meant to be an instructional companion to the Python in 10 PDFs that I have put out. So these are meant to be about 45 minutes, get through 2 or 3 sessions each time. So I'll get started here. Sharing my screen so we can actually run through this. Okay, this should hopefully be coming up here. All right, so overall purpose of Python in 10, to be quick bite-sized guides to basic usage and tasks in the Python coding language. Now, I'm no expert. A lot of this Python is self-taught or sort of cobbled together for what I need to use it for. But I've been able to use Python a lot for various tasks and certainly makes my life easier. So if you find this to be helpful, great. And so a lot of this is more pragmatically towards solving problems, especially in my field, not so much of a pure science, or not so much pure science, pure sort of computer science theoretical standpoint, which is perfectly fine, but that's not my aim here. And some of the things I do may not be particularly elegant, maybe not, as some people would say, terribly Pythonic, but it gets the job done on my end. So hopefully this is of some use to you. So let's get started with lesson 1, which is simply getting Python. Now, Python can be gotten on all the major operating systems: Windows, Mac, Linux, Unix, and other. I am working on Windows. That's where I typically use Python, and that's typically the easiest to get on, but whatever operating system, you should be able to get Python. So to get it in Windows, pretty simple. You go to python.org/downloads, and really the latest version for Windows should be the first thing here, and you can just click the button and follow the instructions from there. For Mac, it's a little more complicated. You have to look under the different OS and go to Mac OS. And then on that, from there, you can do the latest Python 3 release. Of course, the numbers will be different later on. As of the time of creating these slides, the most recent Python was Python 3.11.4. Now on Linux, that's going to be more complicated. You can check out this wiki, python.org, or beginner's guide. But for things like Red Hat, CentOS, or Fedora, you install Python 3 and Python 3 devel packages. Whereas for Debian or Ubuntu is really the one here of Linux that I've used at all, though I don't think I've personally did Python. You will need to install Python 3.x, Python 3.x dev packages. For Gen 2, this ebuild, you might add Mastic first. That doesn't make any sense to me. I've never used Gen 2, but maybe it does if you're a Gen 2 user. Though if you're a Gen 2 user, you're probably not needing my help to get something like Python on there. And then for anything others, there's more on that beginner's guide. All right, so once you've gotten Python, you can find it and open it. So you don't need to go to wherever you downloaded Python. So for example, this example here, this is when I first did it. So your file should be called Python 3.11 or wherever it is at the time now. The number will be different if you download a different version like mine. So like initially, the one I'm working with way back when was Python 3.8. So that's why it shows up here. And I'm showing what it looks like on Windows 10. It might look a little bit different on a different window or Mac. But inside your folder of Python, there should be 4 items: the IDL, the integrated development environment, the actual Python application, and then documentation. So there's a couple different ways you can use, well, several ways you can use Python. 2 of the basic ones is you could actually run Python through the command line, or you can use an integrated development environment. That's what I typically use. Now there's more, not complicated, but more advanced ways of doing things, like through Jupyter or other things like that, but I'll be focusing on IDLE, the IDL, which is what I've historically used for Python and where I use Python most, though that might change in the future. So again, the IDL is where I predominantly use it. You can open up a shell, and so then you could type in Python commands directly, or you can also create files to save and run from there. So you can run what's called scripts. So to create a file, so I'm going to just show you, let's see here. I'm actually going to, let's see here. I already have my set up here, but this is what the shell looks like. But you should be able to type, let's see, IDLE. So IDLE, and if you want to run that, you can just run as administrator. That should, well, no. All right, let's try I think you can just hit it. There we go. Can it work? All right, so if you just search for IDL and open it up, it'll do a new shell. So a variety of things you can do, like file, you can open. So I have a bunch of recent files, you can edit, and new file is where you can create your new file. You'll need to save it first to be able to do anything, to actually run anything. So you can save it somewhere useful. However, I don't need these ones here because I already have my code that I've been saving. And if you want to create in your program, you can just type things out. All the stuff in red are comments, so they won't be run. But let's, for our first program, just print a phase. So in your untitled file, mine is titled, you type the following print. So you're going to do a print, and usually in the IDL, different things have different colors, which is kind of nice. You can do print and then parentheses, and then in between that you can print whatever you want. It'll need to be between either single or double quotes. I'm using double quotes here. You can do whatever you want. I have my similar thing. Python, in fact, does things. You can do the coding standard of something like hello world, whatever you want. But you can have that there, and then before you can run it, you're going to need to save it. And then, so this is a script. And then if you want to run it, you can go up to run and then run module, and then it's going to output whatever you did in from the shell. You can see here it prints out this. And congratulations, you've done something in Python. Now, of course, you can run scripts, and that's what we'll do a lot of, but you can run things directly in Python. So I could have also just done print and then done it right here, and it'll print it out for me. See, there we go. All right, that was lesson 1. Very simple, though it might take a little bit of time on your end to download and access Python. But once you got there, you're off to the races. So with that, let's turn to lesson 2, which I'm going to be calling Obligatory Fundamentals, where I'm going to go through the different things in Python and how to use them. So first of all, in Python, there are things called variables, and these are kind of the baseline of what you'll want to use. Sometimes you can hear things in kind of computer language of things being objects and certain languages being object-oriented, which is Python is. So essentially, variables are going to be named locations used to store all sorts of these objects. So the objects can be numbers, strings, so you think lines of text or other things in quotes, lists, dictionaries, booleans, etc. And you create them by just having whatever your variable name, and then equals, and then whatever value you want to add it. So whatever set of objects you want to have in that variable. Now, the name of the variable can be whatever you want. However, there are some restrictions. You can't start your name with a number or a symbol, so you can't have a variable called 8, like the letter 8, or start with like @age or something like that. And it also can't be the name of something also in Python, like a function or something else that's sort of built in. So that is a little bit on variables. So now to test this out, we want to open a Python script. So I'm going to go over to mine. And I've already kind of created this, so I'm going to uncomment. So to create these variables, we're going to create 3 variables. The first one's going to be the age, your age in years. And this one's actually going to be whatever age you want. And you can just type out the raw numbers, or not raw numbers, but just numbers without any adornment. And you're going to create another variable called coffee, which is going to be whether you've had coffee today or not. This is technically called a Boolean, so it's going to be true or false. You notice how it's orange, and you have to have the right case. So if you say true, that's not correct. That's not a Boolean. It has to be capital I-T-R-U-E. I think it used to be, and it looks like all uppercase doesn't work, so it needs to be uppercase T. Now, if you didn't have coffee, you could have false, but of course, for me, it's pretty much always true. And then you're going to have your fear being a string. We've seen a string before in lesson 1. It's going to be enclosed in quotes, whatever. And anything is a string if it's enclosed in quotes. So it can be a number. So 32, this is a string, whereas age is an number. There's different kinds of numbers, integers, floats, but generally numbers. So this would be, anyways, sorry, getting distracted, but anything in strings in case and quotes is a string. So this is a string, even though it looks like a number. And you can have all sorts of things in strings. You can have a sentence like we've seen before. We can have punctuation, we have question marks, we can even have other quotes. Anyways, but if you double quotes are better, so you can have those single quotes in there without having to do special things. But I'm just kind of getting off into the weeds a little bit. I'm just going to put something very simple. The animal, because the prompt is here, the string of the animal you're most afraid of. This is sort of humorous, kind of having fun here, so you can put whatever thing you want here. And so really that's all we have here. We're not asking it to call. I'm going to comment this out. So if we run this, it's not going to do anything here because we didn't ask it to do anything other than to create this. But if I type age down here, it'll return what that variable's value is. You see? So they're created. Now, if I had something like age 2 as a variable, well, it's going to return an error because I have not defined any variable called age 2. All right. So that's a little bit about variables. Next, let's talk about lists. So lists are groups of objects stored in a variable. So we saw in our first sort of task, we just had variables age, coffee, and fear, which are just a single object. So it's just a number, a Boolean, or a string. But you can have lists where there are groups of objects stored in a variable. You create them by whatever the name of list. And then you're going to have these square brackets. And then you're going to list off your objects separated by commas. You can store the same objects or different ones. They could be a bunch of numbers. They could be a bunch of strings. They could be a whole mix and match of strings, numbers, booleans, whatever. You can store all sorts of variables. And you can actually even store other lists. Anyways, that's getting down the rabbit hole. But you don't have to. And of course, if you've already created variables, you can store other variables. So if I have age, coffee, and fear, I could also go and store that in a list, which we'll see. And then lists are, you think of it, a line of things. You can access specific parts of the list by its index. So list and then bracket 0 is the first object because lists start with the 0 index and then goes up. So 1 is the second, etc. And then you can also go backwards. So list -1 is the last object. So if you want the last object to the list is -1. If you want the second last is -2. So you can do all sorts of things with lists. They're very handy. So we're going to create some list ourselves. What I'd like you to do here in your script, like I've done here, you're going to create a list called favnum, your 5 favorite numbers. So again, it's going to be the name equals, and then you're going to have these square brackets, and then the 5 numbers separated by comma. It doesn't matter whether or not there's spaces. It's really up to you. Obviously, it's more compact if you don't have spaces, but it's a little more readable if you have spaces. So typically I add spaces, but it shouldn't change things. You're also going to create a break list, so breakfast list, where you're going to add a string of items you had for breakfast. Then then you're going to have a couple lists. For this one here, you're going to have an attribute list. Just use your name. So I'm using Mark, and I actually have a couple ones to show you 2 ways of doing it. So Mark 1, you are going to add those age, coffee, and fear variables. So you can add them just what their values were. So like I have here, 32 true and dolphins, or you can just use the variables you already created. And so there we go. And now I'm going to run this. And then I want you to access your coffee variable from your attribute list. So go Mark 1. So if I print it out, you can see that it's a list of 3 things. Now, if I want to access the coffee variable, we know that that's the middle one. So that's the second one. So we're going to use 1, not 0, because remember, or not 2, because it starts with 0. You can see here that it pulls out the coffee. And this is true for Mark 1 and Mark 2 because they're really the same. I just created them in slightly different ways. So there's lists. Moving along, let's talk about math, everyone's favorite thing to do here. So Python can do lots of basic math operations. It can do operations on variables that are numbers. So it can't do operations on things that are strings. And of course, you can, the basic Python can do basic math. If you want to do more advanced math, there's all sorts of things called modules that you can add on to do much more sophisticated things, but we'll just start very basic here. So in the Python script, oh wait, sorry here. Do I mean shell or script? Okay, yeah, so in our shell here, I want you to just do some basic addition. So you can add, so like 5, 22, and 7. If you do that, that'll give you the sum of those. You can multiply, so 7 by 50, then subtract 37. So multiplication, addition, subtraction, division, whatever. And now you can do, it will follow order of operations. So you can see how if we did 7 times 5 and 50 minus 37, it'll start with the multiplication and then subtract. But if you don't want that, you can use parentheses, like you've probably learned. So if we want to say subtract first, use the parentheses, that'll give us a different number because it'll subtract 2 first, then multiply by 7. So basic order of operations. There's all sorts of math operators. With procedure, you can do exponent, modulus, etc. So that's helpful, and you can look more at the Python cheat sheet. And another thing I would like you to do is create variables, number 1 and number 2. I'm going to run that just to make sure we have that. And then I want you to divide them now that we have them. So num1 divided by num2 should be 0.5 because 5 divided by 10 is 0.5. So it's math. You can do all sorts of things with numbers. Very helpful for a lot of tasks. All right, let's get into functions and methods. So Python has a lot of built-in functions and methods. You can also create your own functions and methods, and a lot of introduction tutorials on things like Python do a lot of things with creating your own functions. In my work, I've really found creating my own functions is a common part of what I do. So I'm not going to dig too heavily onto that, but that's certainly a broad field of things you can do in Python, and there's a lot of other resources that can show you how to create your own functions. So I'll just kind of go over what functions and methods are, and as we get later into the series, you'll see how I might use functions or methods or not. So functions and methods, you can think of them as doing certain things to data in Python. And some functions / methods only work for certain data. So some things only work on numbers, some only work on lists, some only work on strings. And the typical function for a function is something like you have the name of the function and then you have parentheses with whatever arguments, which may be 0, but some number of arguments separated by commas. And then a method is usually done on a variable or something like that. And then it's variable dot method name and then parentheses, which may or may not have some arguments inside there. Very important functions that you've actually already seen, some we've already seen, is like the print function. So you print whatever's in there. There's like the absolute value, rounding, min, max. These are all kind of things for numbers. Sorted, that's for lists. Sum, that's again for a lot of times lists. Length, lists, type can be sort of any sort of object. So very helpful. Methods, there's the dot lower. So strings to lowercase, uppercase. You can strip things from a string, replace things in a string, split a string, join a string, append a string. And so let's practice some of those in the shell. So let's print our breakfast list with the print function. You remember our breakfast list, it's over here. So we can print and then break list. I'll print that off. Now let's use the upper method to make your fear variable uppercase. So remember, fear is like this. So let's go fear dot upper and parentheses, and then I'll make that all uppercase. Let's do something else with our favorite number list. So fav num. So let's use the sum method sum function. So sum fav num, and it will sum that all up. So you don't have to do 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 7 plus 42. It'll do that for you. It's quicker. And then let's add your favorite dessert to your name list. So again, my name list is Mark 1 or Mark 2. We're going to add something to that list by using a append. So we're going to do Mark 1, that's the name of the variable, which is a list here. We're going to append, and then in the parentheses here, we're going to add a string of my favorite dessert. So cheese cake. And it's not going to return anything because we didn't say it to. So we're going to print now the new updated list. And now it includes a cheesecake at the end there. So there are functions and methods. Again, there's a lot of really helpful built-in methods and functions that you'll end up using all the time, but you can create your own functions and methods if you want to. And that can be really helpful if you do something a lot, to just create a method, create a function, and then to just call the function whenever you need it. All right, let's move on to another very important piece in Python, a dictionary. So a dictionary is a collection which is unordered, changeable, and indexed. So you think of a list. Lists are ordered, it can be ordered. They're just just like a list, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then whatever is at that spot in the list. Where dictionaries, you think of like an actual book with a dictionary. It has a key. So like what in a physical dictionary will be the word, and then it'll have a description along with other things. And so you can think of Python dictionaries like that. There's going to be a key and a value, whatever value to that key. So they are written with curly brackets and have keys and values, like I said. So you create them by whatever name of the dictionary equals, and then instead of like lists, which are square brackets, these are curly brackets. You're going to have the curly brackets separating the values, and so each entry in the dictionary is a key, unique key, and then whatever value, and you separate that by a colon, and then the key value pairs are separated by commas. So the keys must be unique, but values can be the same. So you can't have, so if you have a dictionary, you can't have like a name Mark and then whatever value with him, and then Mark again. You'd have to make those unique, like Mark 1, Mark 2, or something like that. But values can be the same. So if you say you had a dictionary that you had all the ages of a bunch of people in your family, so it's like Mark, and you can have a value of 32. But say I have a cousin who's the exact same age, say it's I don't know, Charles, his value could be also 32. Now, keys can be strings or numbers, so you could have whatever you want there, strings and numbers, and values here can be strings, numbers. You can even have them to be lists or even other dictionaries. You could have dictionaries within dictionaries. And how you access items in a dictionary, you refer to its key name in the format. So dictionary name and then key, whatever key you have there, and then it can return that value there. And you can add items to a dictionary using the format. You have dictionary name, you whatever key, another key, and then whatever value to that. And so and dictionary can be very, very useful, especially if chaining data together. So we're going to create a dictionary of our own. Oops. I need to go the other way. I need to uncomment a couple times. There we go. We're going to create a dictionary called My Dictionary. So, and you can see here that we're going to have 5 keys: name, age, job, favorite color, and coffee cups, all strings. And you're going to add whatever you want here. So for the value, so my name's Mark, age 32, job research assistant professor, favorite color green, coffee cups I've had today 3. And you can see here that so each key separated from its value with the colon, and then each of these key value pairs are separated by a comma. Now I've done it in this sort of way to make it a little more readable, but you don't have to do it this way. You could certainly just have it all in one line if you wanted to, etc. But sometimes for readability, it's nice to kind of separate them out so you can see all the keys and values. And then, of course, making sure you have the curly braces closing them up. So I'm going to run this to make sure we know that we have our dictionary in here. And now I want to access in that dictionary my favorite colors. So my dictionary. So if I just print this out, it'll show us the whole thing. If I just want the favorite color, so I'm going to add the key in here. And so this is going to need to be a string because it's a string. So fav color. And it'll return green because that's what the value is for that key. Now, we're going to add an item to the dictionary. So my dictionary. So first I'm going to check. So if I say dinosaur, what's going to happen? Because we didn't actually set it up. Well, there's going to be a key error because there's no such key named dinosaurs. So we're going to create one. So let's say my dictionary, the dinosaur key, we want the value of a Boolean, whether true or false, whether you like dinosaurs or not. So the correct answer, of course, true, but you put whatever you want in there. And so now when I call this, it's going to return that entry. Now, of course, you could update this. You could change this to false. And then when you change this, it'll be false. But of course, I'll turn it back to true because that's important. And so, yeah, you can do all sorts of really important things with dictionaries. Now, unlike lists, they are unordered. So you can see here that usually when you're looking through dictionaries, you might need to print it off in a certain anyways, I'm kind of getting into weeds of things. It's not necessarily important right now, but one thing is lists or orders dictionaries are unordered, and so how you deal with them and pull things out and the order you pull things out can kind of you need to keep it in mind as you do more complicated things. All right, anyways, with that, just scratch the surface of all the sort of things you can do, fundamentals in Python. So please don't just end here. If you want to get the fundamentals down, you can check out the cheat sheet below this Python cheat sheet for beginner / advanced. And actually see if I can show you what that looks like. See, stop share. Let's see if I can pull up cheat sheet. Oh, wait, apparently. Apparently that link was deprecated. So let's see here. Well, there's all sorts of Python cheat sheets, but I'll just kind of show you one of them if I can find it. Here we go. Let's see. Share screen. Screen 2. No, wait. Here we go. Share. Okay, so there's all sorts of cheat sheets you can get basics with object types, packages, operators, list, etc. So there we go. So I think with that, I had meant to get into lesson 3, but I think I will save that for next time. Thanks for joining me for Python in 10 lunch break sessions. I'll see you next time.